John and I have a discussion every Monday about what we're going to talk about on the show. And then Caleb and I have the following 3:45 a.m. production meeting. We don't really have that, but we'll stick with that. So John and I are talking yesterday, and this is when I knew that this would be one heck of a topic, because John hesitated, I hesitated, and there was dead air on the phone. And John, we've had time to think about it, so we won't have dead air on the show, but it is on our YouTube page. If you want to vote, you can do so now. Let me ask this real simple. If Nico matched Hendon Hooker in 2022, would that be enough? Now, to be clear, I'm talking about, let's say, the next 2 or 3 years. That's his ceiling, is Hendon Hooker. So your choices are, yes, Hooker was a Heisman candidate. No, Nico should be better. John, where do you stand?
Well, it's a close call because Hendon Hooker had such a great 2 years here, particularly his last season before he tore up his knee. But the thing with Nico is the expectation of being great. His widely ballyhooed and speculated on NIL deal. He's getting a lot of money. He's getting a lot more money than Hendon Hooker did. And I think we look at this now, the college landscape, and we kind of see NFL because players are being paid, and it's just when you sign a free agent or when you draft a player and you get a #1 pick and you spend a lot of money, the expectations are higher for him. I think the expectations are that Nico will lead Tennessee to the playoffs and maybe win a national championship and maybe win a Heisman, because he's got all this coming in. And I think that can't help but factor into this. He's considered one of the greatest quarterbacks Tennessee's ever had already with one start. And I just don't think you can eliminate those expectations. As good as Hendon Hooker was, he couldn't push Tennessee across the finish line. Admittedly, a different postseason situation. But if Nico leaves here and Tennessee doesn't make the playoff, fans are going to be really disappointed. I don't think they were disappointed about Hendon Hooker because Tennessee came up short in the playoff.
Well, now, in all fairness, I'm going to turn to Caleb, but in all fairness, that team would have made the playoff if it was a 12-team playoff.
I know we're talking apple and oranges here, but bottom line, it didn't make the playoff.
Okay. Caleb, if Hendon Hooker is Nico's ceiling, is that a disappointment?
Yes. And John, I actually disagree with you. I don't even think it's close. I'm going to throw a little history for you guys. You guys were around, I wasn't, but sorry. Different offense, different time. But John, I know you followed football. When Tommy Frazier landed at Nebraska, if someone told you Tommy Frazier's ceiling was matching what Turner Gill did, they would have called that a disappointment, right? Even though up to that point, Turner Gill was the greatest quarterback to ever run that option in Nebraska history.
Yes.
But they thought, no, we got Tommy Frazier to go beyond what we did with Turner Gill. And I think Tennessee is exactly the same with Nico Iamaleava. If Nico matches Hendon Hooker's production, not that they're not happy with Hendon Hooker, not that Hendon Hooker's not beloved at Tennessee, they paid this dude $8 million. They didn't pay him $8 million even if it was the old playoff system, they didn't pay him $8 million to go 11-2 and finish number 6 or number 7. You don't pay somebody that to do that. You pay them that money to go win a Heisman and win a national title. Guys, I'm sorry. Anything short of a national title is a disappointment over the next 2 years for Nico Iamaleava.
Would you go that far, John?
That a national championship, that's maybe too far from me. But, yeah, if you make the playoffs, I think Tennessee should make the playoffs both seasons with Nico quarterback. I just think if it doesn't, it's a disappointment. And, yeah, I think it needs to not just make the playoff, it needs to advance. It needs to win some games in the playoffs. Because when you think about it, when you look at the game through a playoff lens and the value of quarterbacks in this current situation, when you look at it that way, what happens in the playoffs? The big time quarterbacks raise their game and they make the plays. And I think Stetson Bennett, though, he never got any kind of hype like that. He was considered just an average guy. But when he got into the playoff, he really raised his games. And C.D. Stroud too, Katie Stroud did too, when with Ohio State, even though it lost. I mean, it wasn't his fault. He played the best I ever saw him play. And we've seen that in the playoffs where the very best quarterbacks have the ability to raise their game. That's what you expect from Nico. It's not about the stats. It's not even about the Heisman. It's about where he took your program. You made this investment. You expect these kind of results. That's the expectation. So I can see it sounds far-fetched what Caleb is saying, but he's got a point on that.
I agree, but I think you both give me this. The roster is better. Now, Jimmy Hobbs disagrees, but let me ask you, John, is this roster better than it was in 2022?
I think it's a little better, but I can't say that without some games.
Okay.
Because I don't know how bad the secondary is going to be. I wonder about the linebackers, that kind of thing.
Well, that leads me to this. So if Hendon Hooker's the ceiling and Nico plays as well as Hendon Hooker, I believe his supporting cast is going to be better. So I think you could have that success. I think if Hendon Hooker was, reincarnated as Tennessee starter this year, that the Vols would make the playoff and be a real threat to make it to the championship game. So I don't know that it would be a disappointment because I think if Nico plays to Hooker's level, they can have the type of success that we're talking about.
Yeah, that's a possibility. And we're not considering all the variables that go into this. We don't know about injuries. We don't know how depleted the offense might become through injuries. We don't know about Tennessee's depth at a lot of positions. There are a lot of questions about this team. For a team that's considered a playoff hopeful and a team that I think will make the playoff, it's got a lot of spots I'm not sure of. However, when I look across college football and I see all these other teams, conferences, I see the same thing. I don't see a team. I think if you looked at it, you'd probably say Ohio State might have the best roster, except maybe at quarterback. But I just think when you look, everybody has some question marks, even the best teams, including Ohio State, including Georgia.
Yeah, I agree, John, and I think that's going to be a continual thing as more NIL kind of spreads players out a lot more in the transfer portal. But I'm still at look, Nico. When Tennessee got Hendon Hooker, let's be honest, we all thought this. You thought it, John. I thought it. We were covering them at the time. We thought that's a good quarterback that if Heupel turns him, he can help Tennessee kind of transition and take a step forward under Josh Heupel. We didn't see what we saw from Hendon Hooker. But that's not the expectation when they got Nico Iamaleava. I mean, we're not looking – if you're Tennessee, you're not looking at a solid quarterback you can build a roster around. Okay, you don't spend – in the NFL, for instance, you don't spend a first-round draft pick, a number one draft pick on a solid quarterback to build a roster around. No, you spend a number one draft pick on a quarterback you think is going to be able to will your team into the Super Bowl. And I feel like you do the same thing with Nico Iamaleava here. You recruited a guy – not to build a roster around that he can help, be a good part of. No, you built this team around him to carry you through the playoff. You're not giving him $8 million otherwise.
No, and I think that's, I think that's where his value will be realized or perhaps not realized. And we don't know how he will do in this situation. I think he will do well, but are in those vital games. It's not the stats. It's not where he finishes in the Heisman poll. It's those vital games. Go back to Stetson Bennett in that last-minute drive against Ohio State where he made those plays. He had help, but the quarterback's got to deliver in those situations. And that's what's expected of Nico.